One wrong move, and Barak would be destroyed. In front of them stood an army of powerful soldiers with 900 iron chariots that tore through everything in their way. Barak got the command to attack them, even with ordinary men and simple weapons. He was afraid and terrified, but he chose to obey God. Israel was suffering under a powerful Canaanite king named Jabin. His army was led by a commander named Sisera, and Sisera was not like other commanders. He controlled 900 iron chariots, one of the strongest weapons of that time. For 20 long years, Jabin and Sisera kept Israel under their power. The Israelites lived in fear. Mothers taught their children to run at the first sound of chariots. In the middle of this fear, in the town of Kadesh, there lived a man named Barak. He was not a king. He was not a famous fighter. He had no chariot, no sword forged from iron, no army standing behind him. He was simply a man trying to survive like everyone else, watching his people suffer year after year. But there was something different happening in Israel at that time. A woman named Deborah was a prophetess who served God. People from Israel came to her for advice and to help solve their problems. She was wise, she was trusted, and more than that, she spoke with a kind of authority that made people stop and listen. One day, Deborah sent word for Barak. Barak came to Deborah not knowing why she wanted to see him. But before Barak ever met Deborah, he had already heard her name. Travelers passing through Kadesh spoke about the woman who judged Israel. They said, people traveled long distances just to hear her wisdom. Some came with problems between families. Others came searching for guidance, and again, people returned saying the same thing. God was with her. So when the message came that Deborah wanted to see him, Barak knew this was not a normal invitation. Deborah looked at him and gave him a message from God. She said, "Go and gather 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun. Lead them to Mount Tabor. God will bring Sisera there with his chariots and his army, and God will give you victory over him." Barak stood there in silence for a moment, turning the words over in his mind. 10,000 men against 900 iron chariots. He thought about the chariots he had seen from a distance. He thought about the stories, the villages burned, the roads no one dared travel. And he thought about what it would mean to stand in an open field, facing that kind of power with nothing but a spear and a shield. Then he gave Deborah his answer.
"If you go with me, I will go. But if you do not go with me, I will not go."
Barak was afraid, but he still chose to obey. He trusted Deborah's connection to God more than he trusted his own courage.
"Barak, I will go with you, but there is more to God's message. The victory will not be yours. A woman will triumph."
Sisera himself will fall by the hand of a woman. Barak didn't argue. He simply nodded and began preparing for what was coming. Barak returned to Kadesh and sent a message through the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun. He called the men of Israel to gather and fight against Sisera. Many of them were afraid, because they knew how powerful Sisera's army was. Slowly, men began leaving their homes and joining Barak. 10,000 of them gathered at the base of Mount Tabor. Mount Tabor was high and difficult to climb. Sisera's powerful chariots were dangerous on flat land, but they could not easily fight on a mountain. Barak led his men up the mountain, and they waited. That night on Mount Tabor, Barak walked among his men. Some sharpened their weapons, knowing Sisera would soon arrive. One soldier looked at Barak and asked, "How can we defeat 900 chariots?" Barak looked at the army around him. He knew they were not stronger than Sisera, but he remembered the words Deborah had spoken. God had promised them victory. Down below, word reached Sisera that Israelites were massing on Tabor. A messenger entered Sisera's camp and told him that Barak had gathered an army. When Sisera's soldiers heard about Barak's army, some of them laughed. They had fought Israel before. They knew what happened when their chariots entered the battlefield. One soldier looked toward Mount Tabor in the distance. "They really think they can defeat us?" The other soldiers prepared their weapons without fear. To them, the battle was already finished before it even began. They trusted their chariots, they trusted their strength. They had no idea what was coming. When the news reached Sisera, his camp was already preparing for another day under his command. Sisera was not afraid. For 20 years he had watched Israel run from his chariots. To him, this was just another rebellion that would end like all the others. He ordered his soldiers to prepare. The chariots that had kept Israel afraid for years were brought out again. He could not ignore 10,000 armed men gathering so close to his territory. He gave the order, and his entire war machine began moving. One younger soldier approached Sisera carefully. He explained that there were problems waiting for him back home, and he asked for permission to leave for a short time. Sisera looked at him. Then he looked around at the other soldiers watching. To Sisera, there was only one thing that mattered: victory. He told the soldier that the enemy would not wait for his problems, so neither would he. The soldier lowered his head and stepped back into line. The army continued preparing. This showed how ruthless Sisera truly was. Sisera gathered his army and brought his 900 iron chariots to the Kishon River. The ground shook as the chariots moved forward, with horses, soldiers, and weapons covering the valley below. From Mount Tabor, Barak and his men watched the powerful army coming toward them. Some of the men on the mountain went pale. A few whispered that this was madness, that no one could win against such a force.
I don't know.
Then Deborah turned to Barak and spoke again. "Go," she said. "This is the day. God has gone ahead of you." Barak looked at his men. Then he looked down into the valley where Sisera's army covered the land with iron chariots and soldiers. He thought about 20 years of fear. 20 years of families hiding, villages suffering, and people running whenever they heard the sound of chariot wheels. He gave the command, and 10,000 men came down off the mountain. What happened next seemed impossible at first. Before the battle began, a few drops of rain touched the ground. One of Sisera's soldiers looked up at the sky, but ignored it. The chariots had never failed them before. But slowly the ground beneath them began to change. As Sisera's chariots pushed across the plain toward the river Kishon, the sky darkened. Rain came, sudden and heavy. The river swelled. The plain that had once been solid and open, perfect ground for chariots to move freely, became a trap. Wheels that once rolled like thunder now sank into the mud. Horses stumbled and panicked, pulling against harnesses that would not budge. Chariots that had terrorized Israel for 20 years became stuck. Barak's men swept down from the mountain into the chaos. What happened next was not the long, difficult battle everyone had feared. It became a complete defeat for Sisera's army. Soldiers who once rode proudly into battle now climbed out of their trapped chariots, trying to escape on foot through the mud. Weapons that once made Israel afraid were no longer enough to stop Barak's men as they attacked from every direction. In only a few moments, Sisera had lost the greatest advantage his army had. Barak pushed forward with his men, cutting through the confusion. Chariots lay abandoned in the mud, horses running loose across the field, soldiers throwing down weapons. The army that had crushed Israel for 20 years fell apart in a single afternoon. Sisera himself understood quickly that the battle was lost. He leaped down from his own chariot and ran, choosing to escape on foot rather than risk being trapped in the mud like the rest of his men. He fled across the plain alone, leaving his soldiers behind, leaving his entire war machine behind. Barak and his men chased the remains of the army all the way to Harosheth Hagoyim. Every soldier of Sisera's army fell that day. Not one was left standing. The chariots that had once rolled across Israel with such terrifying confidence now sat empty and broken in the mud, useless pieces of iron sinking slowly into the earth. But Sisera was still alive, and Barak knew that as long as the commander lived, the threat was not fully over. Far away from the battlefield was the tent of Jael. That morning had started like any other day. There were no armies around her, no sound of battle, no chariots. She did not know that the commander everyone feared was about to arrive at her own tent. While Barak searched the battlefield, Sisera was getting closer and closer. Sisera ran until his legs gave out from exhaustion, until he stumbled toward the tent of a woman named Jael, wife of Heber. There was peace between Heber's family and King Jabin, so Sisera believed he had found safety. Jael came out to meet him and told him not to be afraid. She brought him into her tent and covered him with a blanket. He asked for water, and she gave him milk instead, something warm and comforting that would help him rest. Sisera asked her to stand at the entrance of the tent and tell anyone who came looking that no one was inside. Then he fell into a deep sleep. While he slept, Jael took a tent peg and a hammer in her hand. She moved quietly toward him, and in one motion, she drove the peg through his temple and into the ground beneath him. Sisera died in his sleep, inside the tent of a woman he believed had offered him protection. Just as Deborah had said, the final blow did not come from Barak's hand. It came from a woman. Not long after, Barak arrived at Jael's tent, still searching for Sisera, still chasing the last thread of the enemy's power. Jael came out to meet him and told him to come inside so she could show him the man he was looking for. Barak stepped into the tent and found Sisera lying dead on the ground. The war was over. News of the victory spread across the hill country faster than any army could march. Deborah and Barak sang a song together that day, remembering everything that had happened.